Well, hello again, indoor gardeners. Welcome to the Indoor Gardener Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Dreiss, owner of the indoorgarden.etsy.com, little plant shop online with rooted cuttings, succulents, foliage, some cool stuff, unusual stuff. I say it's jungle in there, cool plants for cool people. Also, I own Greg's Lawn and Garden Care, design service, maintenance, etc., located in Athens, New York. Let's talk about repotting of your indoor plants. And this can also go for outdoor plants as well, but let's concentrate more on plants that you're growing indoors, whether you're going to put them inside or outside for the spring, back in for the winter, etc. When should you repot? How should you do it? And my biggest question there, before I give any answers, is why is this yet another garden topic that is so complicated and confusing and full of misinformation on even some of the biggest Facebook garden groups, garden magazines, and websites all across the gardening world? Let's start with when you should repot. My opinion on that, and it's also backed up in fact, is you can repot whenever you want. You buy a new plant at the store, you bring it home, you got a container that you like, you don't like the one it came in, go ahead and repot it. Now, wait a minute. What about the fact that the general consensus out there is don't repot it for at least a month, let it acclimate to its new home? Makes no sense at all. If that were the case, why do so many garden centers and plant shops offer a repotting service when you buy the plant? Are they going to hold that plant for you for a month while it gets acclimated to its new pot before you bring it home and acclimate it to its new environment? No, they're not. They offer the service right there because you might find a container that you like at the store or even have one at home, and they will repot it for you right there. And they're not going to tell you to leave it at the store for an entire month. They're not just doing it to try to sell you a pot or sell you a soil amendment or something or fertilizer and up pot and upcharge. They're doing it as a service that might be needed or something that you want because you don't want to do. It makes no sense to bring a plant from the store, bring it home. It's going to go through a little bit of shock anyway. Most of the time, very little, you won't even notice. It's just going to give it a little kick and it'll trip for a bit, but it'll hit the ground running, or in the plant world, hit the ground going. So using that theory of waiting a month because it's got to get used to its new location, why after a month, when it's just getting used to its new location, do you want to quote unquote shock it again by repotting it? Why not just get it all done at once? So repot whenever you want, especially on new plants, because it doesn't make a difference whether they do it in the store for you and then you bring it home, because theoretically it's getting shocked by being transplanted anyway. So yeah, plants do go through a bit of a shock, but it's more of a bump in the road, a hiccup. It's going to take a while for the plant to get used to growing, just like when you wake up in the morning and or you've got a shirt on that's too tight and then you get one that finally fits. You're like, ah, you move your arms around a little bit and say, hey, this is really nice, I can get used to this, and then you take off. So again, if it's a new plant, if they're going to repot it for you in the store, you can do it at home too. There's nothing special that these people know any more than you do, or any magic dust that they put on the plant or the pot in the store that's going to make it okay to repot at the store and then take home. But you have to wait a month when you bring that new plant home. Nonsense. Another thing is they say wait to repot until spring. Don't repot during the winter. Why? Well, they say, well, the plant is dormant. It's not growing. You don't need to shock it then. Well, again, it's a little bit confusing to me because wouldn't it be easier to replant the pot during the slower season while it's not actively growing so that it can get used to its new pot? And then as the days get longer in the winter, It's in the pot and the plant starts actually growing. The confusion is don't do it in the winter. Well, wait a minute. Well, it's winter outside, it's not winter inside. Is your home below freezing in the winter? No. Chances are it might be 72, 74 degrees inside. That's perfect growing weather. And if you've got grow lights, the plant doesn't even know that there's less light outside because you're growing under grow lights. And most people who have a lot of plants have grow lights because you're not going to buy a lot of plants, have them all die, and then go buy a lot more plants unless you're going to have grow lights to keep them growing. So again, repotting in the winter, it's not harmful. It doesn't do anything. And if you think about it, the days actually start getting longer on the second day of winter. So using that rationale, you shouldn't be repotting your plant as the days are getting shorter in the fall because they tell you don't repot in the winter because there's not enough light. Well, every day in the winter from day 2 on until spring, the days are getting longer. And the reason I say it's okay to transplant in the winter is because the plants are growing a little slower. They don't go dormant. And why would you not plant or replant a pot during the slower growing season as opposed to while it's growing feverishly in the spring and summer? It seems to me, and it actually makes more common sense, much more sense, that you're shocking a plant more while it's actively growing by putting it in a new pot than doing it during the slower part of the growing season. So, number 2, it's okay to repot in the winter. Number 3, what size pot? We've got a whole episode coming up on that called That Pot Is Not Too Big. General consensus again is don't go up any more than 1 or 2 pot sizes. Again, that's poppycock. We'll talk about all that stuff later because that is a whole episode unto itself. So, containers, choose whatever container you like. It's better that it has a drainage hole, but if you know how to water and you learn how to water properly, you can grow plants in pots with no drainage holes. I have several with no drainage holes. It's just a matter of learning and being much more careful on how you water. It has taken the garden industry almost my entire career to change the status of the drainage stones in the bottom of the pot. It took literally my entire career before the drainage stone myth was corrected. There is absolutely no need and no reason to put any drainage material in the bottom of your containers because what happens, and it's finally accepted practice among almost all gardeners, except those bizarre websites out there and freelance writers who just write for affiliate or clickbait who don't know what they're talking about that still say to put drainage stone or some type of drainage layer in the bottom of the pot. Don't do it. And the reason is it changes the capillary space or the pore size of the soil. Water does not like to travel through an abrupt change in the size of the capillary action or the tube or the holes or the air pockets that it goes through. It just doesn't happen. So by changing that space, by putting a layer of drainage stone in the bottom of your pot, you'll say, look, the water's not collecting in the bottom of the pot. No, it's pooling just above those stones. It'll eventually get out, but it's also going to be sitting that much closer to the roots. And we all know what happens if your pot's too big, right? The roots rot. Ha ha. No, they don't. So skip the drainage layer. So let's recap when to repot your plants. Basically, any time you want. If you want to change the pot, if you find a new pot that you like, you change the color of your room. But as far as the plant goes, the plant doesn't care. You should repot plants when, after you water them, you find that the water is running out too quickly, or when it dries out, that the root ball is actually shrinking and there's an air pocket, an airspace between the root ball and the side of the pot. That means it's root bound. It's time for a new pot. Now, the process of repotting, you'll see some TikTok videos where they absolutely destroy the root ball of the plant. There's no need to do that. They're going to tell you, well, you want to replace it with fresh potting soil. What's fresh potting soil? Something you buy at the store? How do you know it's fresh? How do you know how long that bag of soil's been sitting on the shelf? Well, I bought it. It's brand new. It's fresh. Well, how do you know? I've had some bags of soil sitting around my garden center for 2, 3 years. They're still perfectly fine. Doesn't go bad. It only goes bad if it sits outside and gets full of rain, full of water, turns into an anaerobic environment, and then gets loaded with fungus gnats. So don't go and remove all the soil from the roots unless you really know what you're doing. I don't do it because I've had very terrible luck doing it. Even being a gardener for 40 years, I've had terrible luck removing all the soil. So take your favorite soil, um, upsize 1, 2, 4 sizes bigger, doesn't matter, whatever size you like. Set the new plant in the soil, water it down well, check it back later on to see how much the new soil you put around the edges sinks down in the pot because you're not actually losing soil. What you're doing when you're watering is just forcing out excess air so the soil is going to settle. Fill it back up again, and you're set to go. Whatever pot you like, whether it's terracotta, plastic, ceramic, with a hole or without a hole. Just remember that if you're going to put plants in pots without holes, be extra careful when you're watering. So, in a recap, when it's time to repot, when the plant looks too big for the pot, when the root ball shrinks and there's an airspace between the root ball and the side of the pot, or whenever you feel like it. Doesn't matter if the plant is new, doesn't matter if it's the middle of summer, the end of fall, or the middle of winter. You can repot whenever you want. For the Indoor Gardener, I'm Greg Dreiss. Thanks for listening.